All right, good morning everyone, all of you. I hope you can all hear me, there's too many here. And particularly, of course, those of us that are watching us on the television streaming here from the hotel at Guildford in Surrey, and particularly to our, I guess, one and only viewer, Art. He was got up in the middle of the night in Washington to, I guess, checking on me whether or not I say the right thing. But anyway, nice to see some of you here, and basically there's a couple of things that we need to talk about this morning. But the first thing is that I'd like to deal with an issue that's becoming quite important, and that's creating quite a lot of problems with the ITU these days, and that is the control of satellites. And if you look at controlling of a space station, sorry, just turn it down. The controlling of a space station, every space station must be capable of being turned off by telecommand and remote control, obviously. And the reason why is pretty obvious. But for those that keep on asking the question from us why, it's really self-interest. If another station causes interference to your operation, you would want it to be turned off, and quickly too. Reciprocity applies, so if your station causes interference to another, they will want you to turn it off, the offending transmitter, reasonably quickly. It is the international treaty law. Enlightened self-interest is the basis for the treaty concerning the use of radio, worldwide, the International Telecommunication Convention, including the radio regulations which form part of the treaty. And that's one of the problems, is of course that all these sort of like very highfalutin wording that we still have in some of the ITU documentation. So what does immediately? Well, because what they say is if a satellite or a space station causes a problem, you must switch it off immediately. Now, what do they mean by immediate? Fortunately, it's vague. And a minute, an hour, a day, a week. The treaty text is intentionally vague, which leaves us with room for interpretation. So I guess it some way helps us. The practical answer, it depends on the situation. If interfering with safety services, then probably now means now. But if it can be tolerated, perhaps it could be like within a few hours, the next pass, maybe within the 24 hours. So it's really vague when they mean in the ITU regulations when they say immediately. Now, what should I do to serve my own interest? As a licensed amateur radio operator, we can be creative. Realistically, any system that will do the job in a manner acceptable to your friends and neighbors sharing the radio spectrum should be enough to meet the spirit of the radio regulations. And this comes particularly the problem with some of these newer CubeSats, where, and particularly those that are in low Earth orbits, the argument often is, well, it's only going to operate for 3 months, maybe 6 months, so what? Or, well, it will stop causing interference because the battery will run down in the next 24 hours. And these are the kind of arguments that we are getting from some of the universities that are building, and groups that are building CubeSats. And we have quite a job these days to try and impress on them the importance that they must have some sort of an independent control system. In other words, at least a receiver on board that you can send a signal to and say, switch off, destroy, do whatever you need to do. And that seems to be the big argument. Now, many people say, well, the FCC, other regulators are not really enforcing the issue. And the ITU has recently taken issue with that, and they have become a lot more stern with the various regulatory authorities in member countries to say, guys, you need to take some serious action. And maybe it's because there are so many different satellites and so many people are launching kind of like, and it's also come about maybe for those very small commercial ones that you can buy for $50,000, and you tell them what you put on and they put something on and they launch it for you. And these kind of things, I think, have caused the ITU to become even more concerned about this. And it's an ongoing debate. All that we can do as the IARU Satellite Advisory Group is to advise people that are building satellites and say, guys, these are the requirements, these are the necessary things you need to do. So there's some suggestion you arrange for enough telecommand stations to keep access intervals between satellite passes reasonably short. What we often find is that CubeSats that are being launched, and of course that should get resolved with the GENSO system becoming operational at some stage in the future, but currently it's not, and you find that the control stations or ground stations are often at the university and the local radio amateurs' house about five or six kilometers or miles away, which hardly provides the diversity of ground stations. So it's quite important. When a station is in a high inclination, low Earth orbit, one should try and arrange for a telecommand station closer to the poles, because they often see the satellite more often. So if something goes wrong, you can switch it off. And then keep telecommand stations far away from each other, as I already said. Don't have them in the same suburb as the university ground station. Some more suggestions: use independent telecommand receiver on the space station, because telecommand signals should be received even when the space station is transmitting, and that's often a problem. We find that the transmitter is 50 kilohertz away from the receiver, and on a CubeSat it's very unlikely that you can actually do that. Incidentally, this document is available on iaru.org. If you stroke satellite, you find this document is there under the title Controlling Satellites. There's a lot more than what I've put into the slides today. And then design the space station so that the capability to command the transmitter off works independently of the normal housekeeping or control computer. We get a big argument to say, well, we've got something built into our computer and something, and that will switch off if the transmitter goes spurious. But I mean, often when something goes wrong, the onboard computer is the first one to stop functioning, and that can cause two things. It either could cause the satellite to switch off completely, or it can cause something to go totally haywire because it's no longer under control. And you can't predict what will happen, and that's generally the problem. So once a turn-off command is received and executed by the space station, a positive command from the ground should be required to enable the transmitter, and you should be able to reset following eclipse should it not re-enable the transmitter itself. So in other words, your command receiver should be able to do a couple of functions. You should be able to switch off, but maybe you also need to be able to recommand it or reset, and that would then be a logical reason for having such a device on board. That's sort of more or less what the story is about controlling satellites, and one can go into a lot of detail. What I really wanted to do today is to emphasize the importance of that, and the importance that ITU is becoming a lot more concerned about these issues, and we have seen already notifications to administrations to say, guys, you need to take this seriously. Another thing that you'll find on the IARU website, that's www.iaru.org/satellite, singular satellite, you find also some other interesting documentations about, for newcomers to the satellite fraternity, what is an amateur satellite and under what conditions does it operate. But it also gives an example of the notification that's required to the ITU. Now in the past, amateur satellites or any satellites operating on amateur frequencies were never notified to the ITU. And that's become a major issue with the ITU now. And they came out with some determinations which were quite complicated. And then the advisory group has worked with one of the officers at the ITU that is actually concerned with that particular issue, and with the registration of satellites, and also putting the satellites in that registration website. And we've now devised with them a very simple system. It tells you exactly what to do. The document again is on iaru.org/satellite, and it explains to you that you should come to IARU advisory panel to coordinate your frequencies. And once you've got that, you advise your local administration, who has to fill in a simple form and send it to the ITU, and then nothing more happens until your satellite is launched. And when it's launched and operational, then the authority has to inform the ITU through another document to say this satellite's now operating, that's the frequency it's operating on, blah, 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 whatever it is that's to be said. Now, the perfect example and compliments to the Swiss, because Swiss Cube was one of the first satellites that actually, the Swiss wanted to do things right, and they, their authority insisted that they follow the process, and they actually did. So what we've done with ITU's permission and the Swiss permission is actually on the website. We also have the exact forms that they used and how they filled them in. So you have an example of the kind of things that would be required. Because I bet you now, if you go to your country's regulatory authority, 9 out of 10 times they won't actually know how to do it. So all that information is available there. And Graham and I and Art must probably have a meeting in August 2011, when the IT official involved in this will actually also be attending the IARU Region 1 meeting that will take place in South Africa, and hopefully we'll be able to clarify some of that issues, but try and make it even less complicated than what it is. But it's already a lot less than if you followed the original documentation that was issued by the ITU, because in typical ITU fashion, they referred you from one document to another one, to another one, to another one, where at least we've been able now to confine it into one file, and it's all there for you. So these are the points, Graham, I think that we wanted to raise, and then of course we want to talk about a couple of other things. The one is when is an AMSAT an AMSAT an AMSAT? And the other thing is what about the frequencies that we would love to preserve for amateur satellites? The IAU on their website, and I will put it up on the screen in a minute, have a determination where they said, well, this is our wish list, and this is the wish list that they work on. And I took an excerpt of the ones that we were looking at, and I'm pleased to see that Murray is here, because I'm sure he can make some input. Now, for many years, some of the wishes that we as satellite operators had were never really taken that serious. There's a change of mood in this thing, and there's a whole change of climate where I think the IAU Administrative Council now realizes the importance of amateur satellites more and more, and they are, I think, more willing to re-look at some of our suggestions, and they've invited us to make suggestions and comments. Whether or not they get accepted, I don't know. The first opportunity we really have is for Region 1 to have documentation, all the Region 1 societies in Europe and Africa to have their documentation at the conference in August next year, where you then can formally, but in the interim, I would like some of your input, because I'd like to take that input and add it into my report, which goes to the AC meeting that's taking place in October, and at least they'll start getting the feel of what the feeling is of this particular group here in Surrey today. But I think the quickest one we should do is this, Graham, and maybe you can take that while I put this up. When is AMSAT AMSAT? Would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. What about that? I've got this thing on me.
These guys can't hear me, but
Somewhere else.
you're always down there on your knees.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Well,
just look what I'm doing for you.
Oh, I know, it's fantastic. Yeah, it was a conversation that we were having a couple of nights ago. Seems an age ago now. But in terms of AMSAT groups worldwide, there are many, from the largest, which is no doubt AMSAT NA or AMSAT, to some of the smallest, and which are probably only 2 or 3 people who are sort of fanatically, passionately interested, and start an AMSAT group, which is fine. The difficulty we sometimes have, sort of internationally, is how do we verify that those 2 or 3 people in any particular country actually can speak with some authority or are recognised as within their country as being the satellite experts or friends. So it was really just a question of whether we could work out a way of verifying the veracity of any particular group. What we were thinking of doing was to suggest that although there is a list of all the different AMSAT groups around the world, there's no sort of central sort of verification for them. But what does exist within the IARU field frame is that all national societies are recognised or not by IARU as the national society representing amateur radio in that country. And that probably what we could do is to get each national society to confirm that a particular AMSAT in a particular country is the right one. Now, that leads us to make an AMSAT organisation only a valid AMSAT organisation if the IARU member society in that country says so. So it's putting a sort of another tier into the organisation worldwide, because there is no AMSAT international, there's no international body, and I don't think there's probably much need for that. But so this is a sort of proposal that we were kicking around. The upside would be that it gives a much clearer view as to what is a real AMSAT group in a particular country. In some countries there are sort of 2 or 3 different ones, and that makes it quite difficult if you're sitting in London and trying to decide which of the 3 Mongolian AMSAT groups. So I'm using Mongolia because I know there isn't, at least I don't think there's an AMSAT group there. Which one is the real one? So that's a proposal or a suggestion that we would like to bring to the table. The actual authority for making that recommendation, Hans, I'm not quite sure how that would work, but I think you were looking, or we were discussing, having a resolution here or an agreement here within this body, which is self-selecting because this body is, the lot have managed to get up for 8:30, but that shows a level of passion and determination. And then you would take it forward, or how would it go?
Well, I think we'll make that suggestion then to the AC that we list that particular, make that listing available. But what we do is we will ask every national society to confirm whether an AMSAT is an AMSAT. But you know, it may not necessarily be acceptable. I don't know what the feeling is here about that. But at the moment, you don't know. I mean, some countries have like 3 AMSATs. I won't mention the ones, but every time we get a satellite coordination request, it says we are the first satellite builder in the country. Meantime, we have already coordinated 3 other satellite groups in that same country, and they all claim to be the new AMSAT. So, you know, it has become a problem. I think one needs to try and at least tie the AMSATs together, and also if you do that, then you also maybe can develop within the IAU list a mailing list of AMSAT organizations and who they are, and make that available to everybody that wants to disseminate information about a new project or a new satellite. So what's the feeling? Barry?
My understanding is that we already have a list of international AMSAT organizations that basically AMSAT-NA maintains. The challenge we have is exactly what Graham has suggested, which is when you get to this question, if you have no way to verify the veracity of these groups, and there are countries that have competing groups. So am I hearing really 2 different issues here? One issue involves how does one recognize an AMSAT organization, but B, from an IARU perspective, since the process is supposed to have the satellite builder go to their AMSAT organization to help deal with the issues of frequency coordination, that is where your interest is. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So I can understand the IARU's interest in this question. I would like to suggest that, at least from an AMSAT North America perspective, that we do sort of go to the board and say, this is how we think we ought to approach it, but let the AMSAT organization sort of confirm from themselves that they would like to endorse the idea of having the IARU recognized organizations be the quote clearinghouse.
We have a mailing list an email list of the satellite organizations or the AMSAT organizations. So it would be easy if we have some sort of proposal here that we actually, as you suggest, we submit that to everybody and say, you know, please comment how do you feel about it. But the only way we can really verify it is to go and say, well, ask your local body, IOU membership organization to verify that you are the legitimate AMSAT organization in your country, but that may not necessarily be acceptable, of course, to everybody. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't think that is acceptable, actually. I don't think you get acceptance on that generally. But why do we have to have one per country? And why does it have to be a country? Why could you not have several countries coming together, say the Benelux countries or something, and having one AMSAT that's theirs, or several African countries or something like that, which would then give them the strength of numbers?
Sure.
And you'd be precluding that if you have to have one per country. There might only be one member in some of the countries.
Sometimes, yeah.
I'm just following up on that and stealing one line out of a talk you'll be seeing later. This hobby is the only hobby in the world governed by UN treaty as promulgated by the ITU, especially when it comes to satellite filing. So the time's coming with the proliferation of CubeSats where there's got to be a clear line of responsibility. For IARU, there's a clear definition of what is a national society, and that's recognised by the regulators and by the ITU. You may well have to start mirroring that idea by some form of international AMSAT clearinghouse to say, yes, we do recognise this group, but not the other one. You're going to have to put something in writing.
The question, of course, then is on what basis do you recognise?
Well, you can define that, but it's without wanting to stop nice innovation and what have you by the university groups, etc. We are going to have to put a framework in, because if they're continuing on our frequencies and the ITU says what you're doing about filing these, we have to have a structure that provides guidance all the way down. Not saying regulate, but it's
No, sure, we cannot regulate. I mean, that's not our job.
But the time's come to, for the benefit of the AMSAT groups themselves, to have a slightly more formal framework than there has been up till now. For the big national groups like North America, Germany and us, not a problem. There isn't much doubt. But as you say, there are a few other ones. And Iaru has its own issue. We've had to sort of take arbitration decisions on which is the National Amateur Radio Society.
Well, I mean, that's true, and there can only be one in the country. If I take you back quite a large number of years, many years, there was a move in AMSAT to rebrand AMSAT as AMSAT-NA, and AMSAT would then become the international body, still maybe run by AMSAT-NA, as they said, and all the other AMSAT organizations would affiliate. But that didn't find too much favor with the board of AMSAT, and I can see many reasons why. And so the president at the time had to just drop his ideas. So it didn't happen at that time. That would, of course, have been an easy way out. But then on the other hand, can you really expect AMSAT in North America, or the AMSAT Corporation, to be able to take on their job? I don't think it's really their job to do that.
Well, if you go back to history, think what a certain gentleman in ARRL did 70, 80 years ago, when he realised that there needed to be an international radio union.
Yep. So we are no further than we were about 15 minutes ago.
Well, I think there seems to be a consensus that maybe what we ought to do is, again, go back to the existing AMSAT organizations, have them be polled as to what their feelings are about using the National Amateur Radio Organization as the clearinghouse for their respective countries, and then get some feedback from that. From an AMSAT-NA perspective, we get requests all the time about we want to be recognized. We're starting a new group, and we want to be recognized. And the most recent group that has gone forward, at least to us, has been AMSAT Turkey. Now, the exchanges we had with AMSAT Turkey was they were going to follow the process that you basically just outlined. I mean, they were establishing themselves as an organization recognized by the laws of Turkey, and then going to their
national organization basically to get recognized by them, and they've established themselves, as you will, as a viable organization. The problem we run into is when you end up with these competing groups within a single national national country, and they're asking us to pick one over the other. We're in no position to do that.
No.
And so the issue then is, how do we, be consistent in our approach when these organization requests come forward, that we can be consistent in how we apply the appropriate steps and advise them as to what they need to do to get themselves properly established.
Yeah, no, I think so. Is everybody happy with that proposal from Barry? And we follow that process, and then most probably by the time we meet next year well, I won't be here, but I'll be in the US, we can perhaps take it forward. But we can take it forward via email in the next few months.
Right.
The Turkish one, yes, they have gone that process, and they have actually started asking questions now by coordinating frequencies and so on. So they have actually followed that process, and they seem to have been established. The question of having more than one organization, I think it's up to the National Society to say, yes, they're both bona fide. I find in Holland they used to have two for many years, whether they still have or not, I'm not sure. But at one stage there were two AMSATs.
India's another one.
I mean,
India's got about three.
well, we can't figure out how many there really are, and they sort of pop up periodically.
Yeah. And they seem to often be two individuals at a university that want to build a CubeSat, and all of a sudden now they are the AMSAT India.
Right.
And we've had some very unpleasantness already about some of their frequencies. So yeah, we'll follow that process. I think if everybody's happy with that, we'll step off that subject.
Hans, if you can send me an email with an overview of what the proposal might be. There is an AMSAT-NA board meeting in October, and we can certainly discuss it at that time.
Okay, I will do that in the next week or two.
Yeah, as I said, if you go back to what IIAU have for the model requirements for to be recognised as a national society, which includes openness and various other things, I don't think it has a model constitution or anything like that.
No.
But there's at least a handful of guiding principles there that perhaps ought to be set and promulgated as you engage with these other sort of starting groups.
There's another advantage, of course, in that process, and that is that if the National Society recognises an AMSAT association in their country, that at least the two are aware of each other and maybe working closer together. We also see the problem now that many AMSATs don't actually even talk to the National Society and have no access to the regulator in that country.
Right.
So, although we want them to take action on certain things and start promoting certain things in the satellite community, they never do, because they actually don't have access to their regulator, and they don't really talk to the National Society. So maybe the process will sort out two problems all in one, but we'll follow that suggestion. Well, we don't have a lot of time, so let's get on with it. And if you look at the frequency allocation, and Murray, I guess you want to talk about that. 50 megahertz, right now, it says that the amateur service requires retention of the exclusive 50 megahertz allocation where it is now exists, and the provision of an allocation of at least 2 megahertz in other geographic areas with at least 500 kilohertz on an exclusive basis. A harmonized allocation for amateur satellite service is also sought to bridge the gap between 28 and 144 existing allocations. We'd like
And
to
you're
talk
quite
about
right.
that quickly.
We will be talking about this in far more detail in a few hours' time, but the key point is the new sentence that wasn't there last year, and that's the last sentence, which is the satellite service sentence. That's never been there before, and I will very modestly claim credit for writing it in there, and how that got there that fast is the story, or one of the stories of the next talk. But it should set you thinking, and you don't necessarily have to wait.
No, you're right.
You don't need a license to fly a receiver.
But having said that, I think that is
will
too
take time.
vague, because when you say that we want to bridge the gap between the two and we're looking for a harmonized allocation, and I think it's all saying we're looking for, but I think that one needs to make a suggestion. What is the most likely one we're looking for? Because at least then you know what you can work for. Right now, it's just nice because it could stay like it forever after.
The internal target's the top half of 51 megs.
What is the target?
Well, the important thing in there is that there will be no harmonisation by the ITU for the top 2 megs, so 53 and 54 megs, which is allocated in other parts of the world, won't be acceptable in region 1. So generally speaking, we're probably looking in the somewhere in the 51 megahertz band, and ideally all of it.
The whole 51.
Well, either 50 or 51. Part of that will be amateur primary, and it's wherever amateur primary will be. In several years' time, that's not a current agenda item at international level.
But I think it would be useful if we said, okay, we know that it's going to be either on 50 or 51, but to sort of saying, well, our expectation is we would like that segment.
Well, what you have to not preempt is an incredibly controversial topic at Sun City on the subject of the 6-metre band plan that our terrestrial colleagues will no doubt have quite an input into.
All right, so at this stage all I can say in my report is that we are pleased to see that this has been added to that, and we believe it's very important to take this thing forward as fast
we'll
as
probably
possible.
look at the 2-metre band plan as the model for what will happen here, actually.
Would you clarify, what is this document? What is this
This
based
is an
on?
IAU document. You'll find it on iau.org, and it says a frequency wish list.
Yeah.
And it goes through HF, all that. I just took out the ones that we have of interest.
Yeah, I'll talk about it.
Okay.
It's the top strategic requirement that governs all policy. There's 20 pages of it. This is one of a couple of revisions that were made last year.
So has this been approved by?
Yes, this is in public.
And it actually is the guideline that the AC, the Administrative Council, works on in terms of how they're going to position and what they do on agenda items and in all the negotiations at the various working groups at the ITU. So it's a useful document that we need to really actually stay ahead of all the time. And maybe we as satellite people haven't really pushed it hard enough.
I think it's the first time in a long, long time that a satellite change ended up in the document, isn't it?
Thanks, Howard.
I won't quote how many years, but...
Yeah, I know. All right, we don't have to go, these are the various regions. Then the next one, amateur service requires allocation, it's near 70 megahertz. And we have any interest in that 70 megahertz for satellites? At the moment, there's no specification of what it's used for.
No,
In South Africa, it's limited to propagation studies, whatever that means.
Yeah. The thing about satellites is you need a complete region, if not the world, to agree. And although we're developing quickly in the European area, the 70 megs is way too early, although I am aware of at least one experiment in the US, because, again, this partly opens up when you don't have band 1 broadcasters in the way, but the military also use these frequencies, so it's a little tricky at times.
So at this stage, we don't make any noises.
Yeah. That wouldn't be one of my priorities to go for
No, I
in
don't
the
think
next
so.
decade.
All right, 420 to 450. We require the existing allocation to be retained and opposes new uses by any services or low power devices except where sharing or compatibility studies have been satisfactorily concluded. But this frequency is forever in argument in many countries, because I mean there's some countries that just willy-nilly reallocate, and maybe we need to make a stronger noise.
Well, that horse is left the stable.
Yes, in the case of the 433 ISM band, it's rather late there. I'm very aware, of course, that a couple of countries right now are having problems in what I would call this extended band, the core bands 430 to 440, of which the satellite people have only got 3 megs. But I have to say, you're not using all 3 megs of it, and that's away from the ISM section, so there's still some scope there. But it'd be nice to extend it up a couple of megs, but because of the military radars, it's a tricky one to go for.
So we don't have a big issue at this stage that we want
a lot of it
action
can
on.
be solved by band planning. What will be interesting here is the competition that the satellite community will get from the rise of digital ATV in the same band.
In countries where it's allowed.
Well,
Many countries it's restricted.
when you go digital, the bandwidth fits. The reason you don't have ATV much in the band at the moment is analog isn't very interesting. When it goes digital, it's one of the great showcases for the hobby.
So at this point, we don't have anything we want to go to the AC with.
There's a desire, I think we've got an existing desire in Region 1 to look for expanding the satellite allocation within the core amateur allocation, because you've got plenty of cases where the satellite guys actually either have allocated or use far less than the main terrestrial allocation.
Could do with some for the CubeSats, I'm telling you.
Oh, so you do have 3 megs, which is an awful lot of 12 kilohertz channels.
Yeah, a lot of it is
25
reserved for the
channels.
International Space Station, or
Yeah.
things like that. So we're actually quite limited. But
The-
we need
the-
to,
the
but
point-
in terms of the 50 satellites, which Graham's
Well,
going to talk about later on,
rather than an
we're
amateur
looking for
argument,
some space.
yeah, what you have to show at ITU level is you've run out of space. If you're not using all that theoretically you can, you're on the sort of.
But in the
difficult
70
ground.
cents, Ben, just help me, is the satellite allocation of 3 megs, is that purely in our band planning, or was that in terms of the ITU?
No, from an
I think
ITU point of view, it's 435 to 438.
Yeah, that's what I
Our
mean.
band plans,
So
just
we
like
need
in
to,
2
you need to
meters.
sort that out in region
Yeah,
1
well, it's
in
like
August.
in 2 meters, you are in the top few hundred kilohertz, yet you know, from an ITU point of view, you've got 2 megs, so they don't see the problem. It's for us to sort ourselves out.
Okay, so there's nothing much there.
Ah, yes.
1240 to 1300, we seek the retention of the band. 1260 to 1270, and deletion of the Earth to space only restriction. Now that we've been on to, well, that's also new, that last bit, the restriction, because that wasn't in before.
I think it has been, actually.
Is it?
The developments there really are what Region 1 are doing in respect of the Galileo, and not just Galileo, other sort of primary users, which are tending to make us look down at the bottom of the band at the 1240 area. But it's nowhere near ITU level, it's more at sort of regional band planning level.
So there's nothing much that we need to do here.
Other than the
Yeah.
defend strongly
Yeah.
and the request to delete the Earth to space
If
Yeah,
we
that-
were
that's
to
our
see
point I
a
wanna make.
positive, as those systems get deployed, if we see a positive squeeze, then basically we want to move the satellite allocation downwards. So that there's no doubt we want to harmonise almost certainly in the 1240 to 1250 area.
The other issue is then in terms of the restriction removed. Does it have to be done at the WRC, or is that something
Yes.
you can do?
Now,
then
if
we're
you're
not-
transmitting down,
Yeah.
right, here's an interesting one for you. If you're transmitting up, you can often do that almost on a national or regional basis. If you want to come down and you can't direct a beam, which amateur satellites generally can't, then you need all the agreement of the countries under the footprint.
Yeah, okay.
And you're looking down into the primary radars, and that's why that restriction's there. The primary radars have priority over the new Galileo services. Yeah.
So there's not that much chance that we will get that deletion there.
Not
It's not on
in
the agenda
there.
for 12.
The reason we're looking further down the band is the radars tend not to be there.
Okay.
I'm conscious that we're overrunning on time as well.
You can go to town on this one.
It's a lovely band, full of Wi-Fi. What more do you want?
I know. We've got amateur Wi-Fi and we've got whole networks running on there.
That's why we're allowed to have it. No one else is interested.
That's not, well, I don't know. We have lots of interference these days. Right. What is our reaction or action there? Do you have any particular action that we want from a satellite point of view?
I think I'm sure the satellites would appreciate an extra 10 megs to get them down below 2400. The terrestrial operation, though, tends to be at the bottom of the band, and the big thing, which probably needs a bit of an update in that text, is 2300 to 2400. It's one of the top favourites for WiMAX and LTE in
right.
many parts of the world,
Yeah.
in addition to sort of some satellite radio systems as well, which nomenclature of useless.
So what should we then be canvassing for in terms of our requirements?
10 meg below
10
2,400.
Yeah, it's the
Don't
two,
really-
the
don't really
2390.
know where,
Yeah.
but very true. And accept 5, ask for 10.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dilemma that. In at least one country recently, we've asked for a complete move from that band to the next band up, which I presume you're about to put on the slides.
But this one says the requires retention of the band 2400 to 2450. Now you say you want 10 megahertz below 2400.
Yeah,
Because the rest of it's descending into chaos.
that's right.
There is a guard band. If you look at your spec in an urban area, the actual, the channels, the Wi-Fi channels are all many and various depending on which blah, blah, blah. Well, they go up a long way, but if you look generally right down at the bottom, 2400 to 2400, the bottom 500 kilohertz generally has not got much QRM. So if you've got a well-designed receiver and on the ground and a satellite transmitting right at the very bottom, it's still workable, not for wideband stuff, but for narrowband downlinks. I believe it's still workable, but only just the bottom few kilohertz. So we actually really only need sort of 1 meg below there, and we'd be okay.
But then that point here saying that the satellite service requires 2400 to 2450, how should we modify that? I mean, a request for...
And an additional 10 megs below that.
Yeah.
And additional.
Yeah, well, this will no doubt get discussed next year, but the time has come to ask for substitute spectrum due to harmful interference. This is a band where there's a good justification.
The reason why I'm looking for that is there is one Iaru AC member that was violently opposed to any of these kind of suggestions we're taking now, and now he's changed his mind and actually wants to almost champion it. And that means is that if we can him to start at least talking about it and championing it at the next AC meeting, then it starts easing up a lot more in the future.
It is controversial to admit defeat in a band, but with 433 and this band, you know, the writing's on the wall, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, you're nearly there.
Well, again, I'll be talking about this one, and particularly 3400 in my talk, so...
So we'll take it from when you discuss it, and anybody has the issue with that, we can discuss it at
it's
that
that
meeting.
bottom 10 megs is the target area, obviously.
Okay, I'll take it from your thing. And well, this
Yeah, no,
saying
skip that.
right, and then all these others we seem to have no. We just looked
Yes.
at all those bands, and these are the allocations according to the various noise levels and blah blah blah. Why? That's what we actually would be looking for once they started assigning those.
One day.
Yeah. So that we
But
remain.
hopefully not those. Region 1 did quite a study on these, but it hasn't percolated into this particular document yet.
But if you've done a study on that, we should then resubmit that study.
Well, there's an alternative plan, and that is to probably license. The other area where you can have frequencies is where license exemption works in our favour, and this happens to be one of those bands actually.
At this point
Just
in
at
time.
this point. Just like 60 gigs is now available to a lot of amateurs due to the same
But if
trick.
you guys have done a study, then maybe we should re-emphasize that this study was done for them to reconsider this table.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because remember, this is a document that is
That's
also
quite old.
circulating at the ITU. So we need to at least get them to accept the study details and then update this where possible.
Yeah, oh yeah, this does need a huge rewrite.
Will you supply that info to me?
Yeah, well, in 2007 was when Region 1 looked at it, and but we knew that there wasn't going to be a sort of allocation as such.
No.
So,
But you see, what worries me is if
Yeah.
the document is at the ITU, if you've got 5 minutes left,
Yeah.
if it circulates at the ITU, I'd rather that the AC puts the right frequencies in there.
or don't put any at all at the moment.
Yeah.
But 320 is actually my one of my targets.
But you see, what happens is with
Yeah.
in the ITU world is that when it eventually happens that they are becoming interested and people are looking for allocations there,
Yeah.
and it gets discussed, then they turn around and say, but you know, your document, you never really made any expectations for the future. So you've got to always have your presence. Right, we got 4 minutes left.
No, you haven't, because we need to clear the room and restart it and set up the
Yeah, okay.
presentation.
Well,
About 2 minutes, I'm sorry, to be harsh.
it says 20 past,
Yep.
so it's still 4 minutes to go.
says 20 past the next one starts.
No, that's a welcome. Change your hat, man. Any other comment? We're running out of time. Anything under general that you think we should be looking at? No?
I can just report we've got 25 viewers worldwide, the last count, including from Israel, 3 from the US, Canada, Italy, Hungary, Japan, Norway, Belgium, France and India.
Oh boy. All right, well, if India's still listening, we'd like to know which organization is the AMSAT organization there. Thank you very much to people watching us on the web stream, and nice to know you there. And if you have any comments, you can send us anything that you'd like to comment on in terms of the IAU frequency coordination. Just go to the website. Everything is there. www.iaru.org/satellite. And you'll find our contact addresses there. You'll find all the details there, all the documentation that you ever wish to want to have if you want to build a satellite, if you have never built one before. Graham, thanks to you, and thanks to Murray for all his inputs, and we'll take some more from him later on. Once again, thank you very much. See you in 2 years' time here, and we'll see you next year for the same meeting in the US, sometime in October. Thank you.